Welcome to Real Coaching Radio, the podcast for coaches by coaches. We are here to teach you how to get the most out of your clients and yourself. This is where beauty meets the beast, brains meet brawn, and science meets, well, bro science. Welcome to Real Coaching Radio. Welcome to today's episode of the podcast. I think this is episode 22. It's kind of just all blurred into one. Today we're going to talk about the 5 biggest problems in the fitness industry. I'm not saying anything, but I blame Love Island. Without any further ado, let's get on with the episode.
Let's go with it.
Right. Talk into your mic because I've basically turned the volume down.
But now I sound really quiet.
Yeah, so you're basically we're both going to sound really quiet.
So do I need to shout?
No, because I'll turn it up afterwards.
Okay.
The reason I've turned it down is because I kind of want
to improve people's hearing when they listen to our podcast.
I basically want there to be less crossover between our two mics. And there's like a hum that I hear sometimes.
Okay.
So
makes sense.
It's just me kind of it's similar to the yoga mat thing, to be honest with you. I ain't got a fucking clue what I'm doing. I'm just trying to
Hey, no one's got a clue what they're doing.
That's how we learn anything. So the Euro's on at the moment.
Yeah.
Have you watched much of it?
Do you know what? I haven't. Hardly any of it.
You seen any of it at all?
No.
None of it?
Actually, that's a lie. I watched the England and Scotland game, which was a complete waste of my time.
That's the worst game you could have watched.
And yeah, I haven't. That's all I've done.
Okay, so it was France v Switzerland last night.
Yeah.
Fucking went to penalties. It was nuts.
Really?
Crazy. Like, honestly, I think it was one of the best games I've seen.
Oh, why didn't I watch that one?
Were you watching Love Island?
Probably.
Because Love Island started last night.
I don't really want to admit to it, but yeah, that's exactly what I was doing.
Yeah, so was Jess. So I went from my house watching the France-Switzerland game to Jess's house where she's watching Love Island. And
just to be clear, I definitely was not watching Love Island. I would rather watch the England and Scotland game, like, on repeat. than watch that utter rubbish. Yeah, right.
Love Island's just full of absolute nonsense. But it was like the first episode last night. And
at least there'll be some new PTs after this.
Which is a perfect segue to what we want to talk about today. And that is the 5 biggest problems in the fitness industry. I'm going to list off the 5 that we've got written down.
Yeah.
I'm going to do it in reverse order.
Yeah.
Okay, so the first one is Love Island, okay? So Love Island's a problem. It's unregulated, so the fitness industry, there's no gut, like, when you kind of become a counselor or anything like that, there's, like, how do you say it, where physios have this kind of...
Yeah, it's like a chartered institute.
And it's like, there is nothing for that in the fitness industry. You get your certificate, and then you work in a gym, and, like, that's kind of that. The barrier to entry, like I said, you literally get a certificate and then you can be a personal trainer. The barrier to entry is way too low. There is a lot of misinformation out there. There's a lot of misinformation out there, probably due to Love Island contestants. And coaching is probably not seen as that difficult of a profession, which probably means that a lot of people undermine how difficult it is to be a good, credible coach. Those are the 5 things, and we're kind of going to talk about them all one and the same. But what do you want to start with? What do you want to tackle first?
Well, let's start with the last one that you just said, which was our first one, because you did it in reverse order. So
keep you on your toes.
Yeah, let's start with the fact that coaching isn't held in high enough regard, I think.
Yeah. Okay. Where do you think this comes from?
I don't know. So the way I look at it is kind of coaching. When we talk about coaching, there's a lot of information out there that's talking about, well, is coaching an art? Is coaching a science? And realistically, it's a well-blended mixture of both. There's all the scientific principles that we need to adhere to in order to achieve results based on what science tells us. And then there's the art form, which is your ability to pretty much relay that information to the client, chop it up, break it down, turn it into what it means for X client and Y client, and how that's then going to transfer into their session in order to make them adhere, continue on their program, stay on their journey, and ultimately achieve their goals. And I think that the art of coaching isn't considered enough, and like I said, isn't held in high enough regard. It's kind of a bit like, I would imagine like Picasso would find it like pretty insulting if I was like, well, I own a pencil, so me and you are basically the same.
Yeah, there's not a lot of other industries out there which people look at it and go, oh, I could do that.
Yeah, but you know what I mean? It's just like I own a pen, I own a computer. Like, I'm not going to go and write Harry Potter.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing, is that there's a lot of people out there, because of things like bro science, because everyone's got like an older cousin who's taken steroids but not told them they've taken steroids, and is like, nah, trust me, bro, you've got to train like this. Like, this is how you... Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then from that, like, the Chinese whispers kind of gets passed along. And it's a good thing and a bad thing, like, in the sense of you've got people trying to help each other out, and you've got people that are constantly trying to learn. But I don't think people actually who go to the gym and kind of relay this information. Like, I spoke before about one of the guys who's a binman in the other gym I train at, and he probably hasn't read a study in his life. Do you know what I mean? He has no idea about it, and he will just like upright row your bench press off of you because that's the way that he's got bigger, and it's fine. But then people on that scale, people like, not necessarily him because he's actually quite a nice guy, but people on that side of things where there's no real thought behind what they do. It's just what hurts, and just go as hard as you can. Those are the type of people that then look at someone who's got a brand new client and is maybe doing kind of like single leg kettlebell deadlifts, or doing kind of these exercises which aren't seen as like hardcore, or aren't seen as like the best exercises that you should be doing, because they don't understand why you're doing them. And they're like, well, that's stupid. You should be doing this. You should be doing that. And it's like, it just undermines the kind of, like you say, I guess, the art of why we do what we do.
Yeah, and I think ultimately the art of coaching is going to get you further than the science to a certain extent, because when you start working in the industry, you need to very quickly realize that it is a relationship industry, and you're building relationships with clients, and you've got to figure out what makes the client tick and how to get them progress. So that's the art of coaching. And I think if you're 3 or 4 months into your coaching journey and think like, yeah, I've got this nailed, like, you haven't.
It just makes it. I find it funny because I've got friends, when I've transitioned into becoming a personal trainer, who literally would undermine everything I was kind of doing with my clients and stuff like that, because a lot of my clients are friends. And the reason that used to bother me was because I was like, I really understand why I'm doing this with this person.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you have me who's kind of being, follow the program, and your goal is to get stronger. Well, at the end of this 8-week program, you will be stronger if you follow it. And I don't need someone in week 6 coming in and going, right, let's go for a 1 rep max attempt.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the problem, is that you've got people going, well, I've trained and I've got bigger, when in reality, probably what's happened is you probably hit puberty, you probably started eating a little bit more, and because you were a beginner when you first started and didn't have any muscle on you. You've gained a little bit of muscle because whatever you do would be good. Whatever you do would probably gain muscle at that point. And you go, oh, I know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Like, well, what do you do when you stop gaining muscle? Because that's the point you're at now, and you're not going any further.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And so I just don't think it's respected enough. You know, it's kind of like, I own a gym membership. I could be a personal trainer.
Yeah, and the one thing that I hate seeing is people, ever since I've become a coach, seeing people like training with their partners, getting their partner to do things like, I saw someone start a shoulder press, so seated dumbbell shoulder press, and their dumbbell started down by their hips, and they'd bicep curl it up to the sides and press it up, and that was their partner was telling them to do that.
What? And then they come back to the hips.
Yeah,
every time.
Every time.
Like a bicep curl.
But it wasn't like a bicep. Really, it wasn't like a hammer curl.
Like
it was like out to the side.
It's like a really bad seated clean and press.
Yeah, so my chest is open, and I'm bringing them up from the side. I'm like waving. And then I'm pressing up.
Oh, so like a bit of a like lateral raised bicep curl.
Lateral raised bicep curl, shoulder
into
press.
I might try that later.
And it bothers me. It really bothers me. Like, I get it that you're going to go into a gym. Personal training can be seen as expensive and you don't want to pay the expense. And a lot of people are in that kind of unconscious competent state where they have no idea what's going on. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And which is fair enough. Unconscious, incompetent state, even, should I say? But for me, the fact that people undermine coaching really is one of the biggest problems, because then people that are like, why do you think that is one of the biggest problems?
I don't know. Well, the thing is, like, it's a very egotistical industry, isn't it? You know, in some ways, it's driven by ego from a lot of people, especially like, I was going to say especially male dominant, but it's not just, it's like, you know, male and female. So whether some of it stems from that, and it's kind of like, you know, I'm the alpha in the room, like, this is what you must do.
Listen to me type thing.
Yeah. I don't know.
People get married to their way they train as well, don't they?
Yeah, people definitely have a bias.
Yeah, and it's really interesting actually. So like, I was going through and grouping all my clients into like similar groups as to kind of what they do, and the majority of my clients want to get stronger and want to like build some muscle. But then I've got like a group of like 4 or 5 who basically want to get fitter, get stronger. So it's like, okay, so like they're doing more functional fitness style of training. I've got someone who's like purely just wants to build muscle. So like every now and again, he's not even doing compound lifts. He's just using a lot of machines and things like that. But we bring it back round into that. And like, I was just looking through the different types of clients I have, and I wouldn't say I've pigeonholed myself into only training certain types of clients or only training them a certain way. Because I feel like that's part of like what this is I will give someone a certain program which suits their needs and their wants for the current moment.
Yep.
And someone who is a bodybuilder would come in and go, oh, they're training wrong. 20 minutes on the stepper every morning. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
And I don't know.
Yeah, everyone's got their own bias. Like, it's kind of just this N=1, isn't it? Oh, it worked for me, so you must do this.
And that's, I suppose that takes us on to our second point, where a lot of the misinformation comes from. Because a lot of people think that the thing is with fitness is a lot of it's in the grey area.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And people go black and white with things.
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest problems. There's so many the answer to so many questions is it depends. And I think people don't like to hear that answer. Hopefully it depends is followed up by it depends, you know, you're explaining what it depends on and why it depends on these things. But yeah, a lot of the time it's kind of like, well, you could do this, but you could also do this. And they're just like, well, which one should I do? And it's kind of like, well,
it depends.
Yeah.
No, it does. You know? Every time someone speaks to me, I'm always trying to, like, I'll be in the middle of a session with someone, right? And I've got a planned session. Based on how they move and how they're talking to me and what they're saying, I'll start changing things throughout the session because I'm like, well, actually, you don't need that, or you're not ready for that.
Absolutely, same. Yeah, their session just gets adjusted like as we
go through it. And that is because, like, because there is so many grey areas and there isn't a black and white. There's just general rules and big rock stuff for you to follow, I guess. And I suppose that's part of the job of a coach, is to kind of say, like, right, this is all of the different things that could work, but for you specifically, this would probably be the best way based on what you're going to adhere to, the things you enjoy, what you respond best to, how you move. Like, it isn't just the fact that the straight thing of going, well, supersets gives me a pump, so everyone's got to do supersets. Do you know what I mean? Or it's not a case of just going like, well, everyone's got to go and run because I like run it. Do you know what I mean?
You've got to make it suit the client. It's got to fit their goals. And again, that comes back. That's an art, isn't it? Like, that's the art form of coaching. Again, a lazy coach is just going to be like, oh, well, this is the session I did this morning, so
you can have that.
Crack on.
And do you think the misinformation, like, where do you think that mainly comes from?
I think there's a couple of areas it could come from. I think one of the areas it could come from would be, which I think is maybe our next point, which is a low barrier to entry. So potentially that, because there is a low barrier to entry to work in the fitness industry. And I think secondly, it could come from, again, people's own bias. It's just kind of like, well, I did this and this worked for me, so this must work for everybody. And again, like, misinformation of kind of and low barrier to entry. Like, there's people giving nutritional advice on social media and stuff who are qualified personal trainers. Like, you're not a qualified nutritionist. Yeah. You're a qualified personal trainer. You've got no right. And I kind of like, well, what I've noticed recently over the last few weeks is kind of like all this, all these like people that wear Gymshark shit. They're all like, oh, what I eat in a day. Like, I don't give a fuck.
Yeah. But this is what I mean. Like, the misinformation, like our final point, I said Love Island as a joke purely because it's on and I wanted to transition it nicely. But what I meant is social media. Like, social media is where a lot of bad information comes from.
I think, it's a shame because social media does have, if you know how to find it and you know who to find it from.
I've been extremely lucky with that, you know.
Social media has some really, really good and really, really, there's some like really well qualified, highly experienced, very, very credible people on social media giving out information. And then there's somebody else who just about knows what a dumbbell is, like, giving out probably the opposite information. Yeah, people are just like, oh, well, this person said do this, so like
they look good.
Yeah,
that's would be one of my biggest things, one of the biggest problems for me, and I'm putting it in the misinformation category because I think a lot of the misinformation comes from social media, is our own want and our own insecurities which drive where we get our information from. And our own insecurities being the fact that, well, I want to look better, because most people enter the fitness industry, not only personal trainers, but a lot of personal trainers are driven from insecurities. A lot of people who you see with great bodies on Instagram are extremely unhealthy and driven madly by insecurities. So not only are you looking up to people on social media, giving out poor information based on the fact that you just want to look better, and because they look better, we just automatically go, well, they know what they're doing. Which is why that the people who discredit how important a credible coach is and a good coach is are the people that just go, well, I did this and it worked for me, so I'm going to get everyone else to do this. And it just blows my mind how many people out there, not necessarily sheep, but do you know what I mean? How many people out there are easily swayed?
Yeah.
Because they're looking for that special answer. They're looking for the thing that person is going to give them on social media.
Yeah. And one of the things I really struggle with, which is why we don't actually do this, is there's so many people selling, like, come and do my 8-week transformation package. And it's kind of like, it's just, well, I've done 8 weeks of training. I've eaten lettuce for 8 weeks and got in like really good shape, which is great. Well done. But and then like you just be like, package that up and be like, oh, just follow my 8-week transformation package. It's like, well, you get to week 9. Now what?
So I've got a client who's currently getting ready for a wedding. And again, the art of coaching comes when you have the science which points you in the right direction, and you have experience which points you in the right direction, and you have all of this knowledge which points you in the right direction. But knowing when to use certain things is the really kind of art of the coaching part of it. And the thing that I've got is this client's coming to me, right, I got a wedding in September, like I need to be fucking 9 stone 5 or whatever. I'm 10 stone 7 at the moment. I fit my dress at 9 stone 5. And she doesn't necessarily fit her dress at 9 stone 5. I could probably get her to be exactly the same weight and fit her dress probably better by changing her body composition.
Mm-hmm.
She probably weigh exactly the same. But because she has this goal of like 12 weeks, I'm like, right, I have to almost do one of these 8-week transformation things.
Yeah.
But I said to her, what you have to promise me is that as soon as your wedding's done, you come back and we work on everything afterwards. We work on all the big things that I want to be working on currently.
Yeah. I think it's absolutely fine for people to have like a goal of, in terms of, you know, in 8 weeks time, I want to be in this kind of shape because I've got a wedding, I'm going on holiday, whatever it might be. I think that is fine. But like you just said, I think you also need to look beyond that. Like nobody wants to train for the next 10 years. It's like, we're going to do a 10-year transformation. Yeah. So, well, like 8 weeks is great, but realistically, in your, you know, and then when you sit down and speak to people and you have these conversations, the same words come out of people's mouth. And everybody talks about, oh, it needs to be a lifestyle change. It needs to, you know, create all these habits, blah, 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 blah. So people say the right stuff and then they go and do like an 8-week transformation. It's like, well, that's not a lifestyle change.
I haven't done one. People said to me, like, why haven't you put any transformation photos on your Instagram? And I was just like, I put one of a bloke who trained for a year solid. And it wasn't one of these transformation photos where he's basically at fuck all and in 8 weeks is the little bit of muscle he does have on his body shows. It's nothing like that. And we've used good lighting and a tan, which kills me, by the way.
Yep.
People that use good lighting and a tan, or the people, this is bad as well. And I don't know who it was, but got called out for this. Basically, would get a photo of someone when they're in really good shape. Mm-hmm. And when they get out of shape, take a photo of them then, switch the photos.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, and say like, this is my transformation. Because like, it's social media, like you don't fucking know what's going on.
Yeah, you got no idea, have you?
And like, so I'd be very careful with that, because when people see these 8 weeks transformations and they think, oh, like I could do that. And it's like 2 things. One, you've got to be really disciplined to be able to do an 8 weeks transformation to the extent of eating fuck all and training like mad. Like, and 2, it's definitely not healthy. And 3, what are you going to do after those 8 weeks? Like we've said, but the barrier to entry is probably the reason why there's a lot of this misinformation.
Yeah, there is a very low barrier to entry. You know, you attend a course, you know, and obviously we sell some of these courses and we put people through these courses, but I'd like to think we provide, simply because of the amount of knowledge and experience we have, we provide credible, correct information for people to be able to go and work in the fitness industry. But, you know, the barrier to entry is an issue. And that comes back to some of the stuff we said at the start, where, you know, there's no chartered institute, there's no kind of like real governing body for the industry. But then also there's kind of the integrity of the individual. So when you are qualified and you start working, what do you do to ensure that you continually progress and continually get better? You know, how are you making yourself a better coach? Or are you just like, well, I'm a PT now, like, sit in it.
Some people see it as a jolly, but some people see it as like, oh, I'm going to make a ton of money. And I feel like if that's what you're driven by, I don't know if that's a good way, or that's gonna, like, you'll get found out by that, surely. Like, if
I just don't think it's a way I think if you come into the fitness industry for any other reason than wanting to help people and have a positive impact on their life, I think you might have a very short, successful career and make a good chunk of money. But I think give it a few years and you'll be off doing something else.
Yeah. When I was making the transition to become a personal trainer who I spoke to, there was a lot of people who I spoke to who was like, oh, I did my personal training course.
Yeah.
And my question was like, well, why aren't you a personal trainer now?
Yeah.
And it's because, and I think it's because of that. It's because like, I don't think people come into it because they like training.
Yeah.
And like, ultimately you have to have some kind of love towards training. Otherwise you wouldn't do it. But you've got to think about why you're doing it other than the fact that you like training.
Yeah. Yeah, you need to have a passion for training, absolutely. But I think you need to have a bigger passion for helping people.
Yeah.
And wanting to see other people achieve their goals.
Do you think that if the fitness industry, if it was regulated, do you think that would help?
Absolutely. I think if there was some form of regulations where you had to meet a certain criteria on a yearly basis, or every 24 months you got to, whether
get
it's
audited
you have to,
or something,
like resit an exam, I don't know, some sort of audit.
I think that would be brilliant. So like when I used to do like security stuff, so like intruder alarms, CCTV cameras, they had a thing called NCI, and if you were NCI Gold like accredited, then you were considered like to be one of these elite security installers. And our company was, and like every year we'd get audited, so I'd have to make sure that every job I did was to a certain standard, and if I didn't have it to that standard, I'd have to go back and make sure it was at that standard. And the real good thing about that was I was like, well, it takes me a lot of time to have to fucking go back to these jobs and make sure I do things right a second time round. So I'll just do them right from the first time round. And I think that's the thing that it stops, is it stops people from just going, well, I can get away with this, and this. Because if there was something that people could look to and go, I know that people can go, oh, well, I've got this qualification which says that I can give nutrition plans now or something like that. And I know you get a piece of paper, but like you could probably buy something like that for a £5.
Get it off Gumtree.
You could probably, literally could. Yeah. And that's why like maybe just a governing body. Is there anything that's going on looking towards that?
Yeah, so there's a company called SimSpa who have they've been in the fitness industry a good couple of years now, really. Their aim is to try and make the fitness industry like a chartered industry. Just like physiotherapy, osteopathy, these professions where you're working and manipulating the human body. Ultimately we're working with and manipulating the human body just in a different way. We could quite easily cause harm to somebody the same way a physiotherapist or an osteopath could cause harm to somebody if they did things incorrectly and outside the scope of practice. Yet I don't know, it's just kind of personal training, just crack on, do what you want.
Yeah, it is a bizarre thing to think about. When I first joined, I dealt with a lot of like imposter syndrome, feeling like I shouldn't kind of be doing the job I'm doing, or that I wasn't good enough at doing it. And I think that came from the fact that I wasn't comparing myself to the people that had just passed their PT course or people who were at the same stage of life as me. I was comparing myself to the PhDs that I was listening to, like to you, to people that have kind of had a lot of experience in the industry and gained a lot more knowledge through either experience or like further education. And I was comparing myself to those people and was having that imposter syndrome. And I find it really funny, the fact that there are people out there who think they can just do it without like trying to gain further knowledge.
Yeah. I think, the barrier to entry is low, and I think that is a problem. I do also think that there are certain things that you cannot learn without experience. I think there are certain things that like experience teaches you, and there's no other way to learn those things other than through experience. So I completely get that, over a 5 to 8 year period, after 8 years of practice, you should, in theory, be more confident, well-equipped, more competent in the role that you have. And I appreciate that, there's this time frame of that is impossible to bring forward almost. You have to have that experience. But I also think there's a big part of that is the integrity of the individual to know themselves that it's kind of like, well, I've just qualified. I'm confident that I know what I'm doing. I'm competent to do what I do, but I don't know everything.
Yeah. Well, there's the competent feedback loop where like the more competent you get with something, the more confidence you'll get, which in turn the more competent you will get because you'll feel like you can do more, so you will try more. And it seems to just like feed each other, and it is a snowball effect that only does come with experience, really. Mm-hmm. I was thinking back to something I heard on another podcast, which was talking about they interviewed someone who like won the lottery, and he was saying, I just manifested it. I just spoke it out into the universe, and I was like, I'm going to win a lot of money. And they spoke to him, and then two people were banging on that manifestation is the biggest thing. And I'm like, how many people manifested they were going to win the lottery and didn't win the lottery?
Yeah, right.
And the reason I've said that is because when you look at we've spoke through like the kind of the fact that coaching's not seen as a profession, the fact that there's a lot of misinformation out there, the barrier to entry is low, and it's unregulated. And then the thing is that you see someone on social media, which is probably kind of the next point, and I know we've kind of crossed it, who has a good body, good set of abs, and does a certain type of workout. Like, I'm just seeing people who, I know everything's for the gram, but people get dragged into these things. Seeing a bloke through it was 10-minute tummy burner, this like Asian guy doing a 10-minute tummy burner in the sea, and he's like doing and he would call it like burpee, like jumping jack high fives or something, and would just make up this. Like, why are you making cardio difficult and confusing?
Yeah, right.
And it was doing this type of thing, and I just think like people that see workouts or see someone doing something and go, that's the exercise I need to do, or I need to do that routine. How many people have done that routine and it not worked for?
Yeah, I know. People are just like, if you look at that and think, that's it. That is the missing link.
It works for him, that's going to work for me.
Yeah.
Bullshit. Do you know what I mean? Like,
absolutely. Absolutely.
I think there are a lot of problems in the fitness industry, and I suppose the biggest one is because it's unregulated. People on social media can get away with it, and that is why there is a lot of misinformation out there. And the fact that it's unregulated means that people can just look at it and go, oh well, it's not a profession.
Yeah, it's a fairly unprotected term, isn't it? There's nothing stopping you from going onto social media, creating an account, and just being like, in your bio, personal trainer. Yeah. No one's gonna check that.
There isn't a criteria.
Yeah.
On what makes a good coach, what creates a good personal trainer, if I'm someone looking for a coach, what should I be looking for? There's no real criteria.
No.
Because some people want the 8-week transformation.
Yeah. There's no standard that you have to be delivering to. Do you know what I mean? Like, as long as you've got this qualification, no one's there to say, well, yeah, you're qualified, but quite frankly, you're not good enough.
Yeah. There's
no standard there to say, well, you haven't met the standard. Like, you can't work until you come back and you show competence that you can meet the standard. There's nobody there to say that and to put that in place.
Yeah. It's how do we fix it?
Don't know.
I suppose ultimately that's kind of part of the reason why we started this podcast in some sense, is that one's that unmuddy the water for people who are looking for personal trainers, but for coaches that are just becoming personal trainers, or for someone who's even been in the industry for ages. Like, I guess the reason why we've started doing this is because to improve the standard of the fitness industry, it has to come from people that are credible already. Do you know what I mean? Like that, it has to come from people who are at the top, and that's why, like, with you and my PT, like coaching kind of the next generation of trainers, it has to come from the top in the way that we deliver those courses, and giving people enough information on what to do and how to be a good coach is really difficult because there's a lot of things that go into it. What would you say the big rocks are for being a good coach? Like, what are the big rocks?
I would say, first of all, you need to definitely be willing to work hard, because I think people come into the industry thinking it's going to be a quite easy industry, whereas it's quite a draining, energy sapping, time consuming industry. So be willing to put in the hours and be willing to put in the work. If you're new to the industry, like, find somebody who is credible, who you can kind of use as a mentor or something. And then the big things to focus on when working with clients, say, is just like, listen to your client, listen to what your client's saying. Obviously consider the principles of training that we have, because that's going to be the science side of things, so things like progressive overload, manipulating volume, intensity, and all that kind of stuff. So make sure that your training programs have that in place, and that would be the sciencey side. But then the art form of it, like, just build relationships with your clients. Like, learn who your client is, learn what motivates them, learn to understand what they're saying, and learn to understand what it means, what they're saying. Because you might have two people who say the same thing, but they mean like the complete opposite thing. So if you had a client that's kind of, you might have an online client who every now and then goes off the radar a little bit, doesn't really communicate with you very well. And for one person, you might know over a period of time that actually that probably just means that they're just getting on with it. They're grafting away. They're probably quite busy, but they're getting the work done. Whereas you might have another client who, as soon as they go quiet, like, alarm bells should start ringing, because to them, that kind of means they're probably slipping off the radar somewhere. They're not adhering. They're probably not eating the way they should be eating. They're probably certainly not training. So, people's responses to things can be very different. So understand the emotional side of your client. And the best way you're going to do that is just by listening to your client. So don't always try and be the person who's saying the most. Like, just sit and listen, like, absorb what your client's saying, understand who they are, and, know that if you're trying to work with somebody and you're trying to get somebody into good shape, achieve their goals, whatever it might be, you're not going to do that in a session. You're not going to do that in one phone call. Like, that's not going to happen. Like, give yourself time to build this relationship. Give it 4 weeks, give it 6 weeks, and hopefully within that time frame, you're going to know a little bit more about who this person is. And then you can really start making some changes to their lifestyle. I would say they're the biggest things to start considering.
Yeah, the whole point of that is meeting people where they're at and learning what current stage that client is. You got to think, every single time you have a conversation with your client, you're messaging back and forth if they're online, or they come into the gym if they're an in-person client, you are selling the idea of health and fitness as a way to improve their life. That's what you're currently selling to them. And you don't have to pitch it to them as if you're in a boardroom, but you have to explain to them things and help them understand why these little changes are going to help them. doing things and suggesting things which are extremely easy for them to achieve is going to be one of the best ways to start them along the journey, and to not like scare them off within the first kind of couple of sessions. Like, you have to just allow yourself that every single time someone comes in, like, sometimes you're not going to be able to create this relationship with people, and it's really difficult, and sometimes people are going to go off the radar and there's nothing you can do about it. And I've dealt with clients like that. I think we all have. But you just need to understand that the ones that do really want to learn, the ones that really do buy into what you're trying to do, or buy into the idea that where they're at is not where they want to be, and they want to get better, they want to feel better, they want to start to look better, or whatever their reasoning is, those people that have full buy-in, those are the people you want to really start to learn about and give as much kind of help and information to as possible. Just try your best, I suppose, if you are coming into the industry as a trainer, like Mark said, like, work hard, find a mentor, follow the principles that are being kind of suggested and set out via the science, and kind of the art of it is building relationships with these people. Like, this is a relationship industry, and we very much have to build that. Yeah. So if you are someone out there, I suppose, looking for a coach, like, take those things as well, and like look for those things in a coach. You don't want someone who's gonna copy and paste you a meal plan. Like, as soon as you get a 1,200 calorie meal plan, or like the same chicken and rice and things like that come through, like, ask yourself a question, like, is there reasoning behind this? Like, are you being explained to why that's happening? Like, you may get a meal plan for a reason. Like, I give out meal plans, and I explain why we're doing it. I explain the process through it. I explain where we're heading, and where we want to head is for them to not religiously track, for them to try and, well, I'm going to use the term, but it's harder than it seems, like, intuitively eat, or learn what's right for their body, what's not necessarily beneficial to their body, and so on and so forth. Like, there's always questions you should be asking. I suppose that's the main thing, isn't it?
Yeah. And I think, based on a conversation we had earlier before this podcast, was kind of always ask yourself the question of kind of like, how can I give more? How can I do better? How can I provide a better service? Like, how can I constantly improve? And if you're constantly trying to make yourself better, then, you know, there's no real reason why you won't succeed. If you just become complacent and just like, oh, that'll do, like, then it's a slippery slope.
Don't be like dogmatic and like get married to your ideas either. Like, I know sometimes, like, for example, like, I teach a deadlift a certain way every single time I go and da-da-da. But then the other day I had guys come in and I was like, there is no chance I can teach these guys how to deadlift the normal way. So it's like, right, let's strip it all the way back. Let's change how we do it. Otherwise, if you get married to doing like one things, you'll start shouting the same cues at people. Yeah. And you'll just end up shouting them louder and louder, and it won't go in.
Yeah. Yeah. It's got to be individual to that person. Learn and understand who your client is. Get really good at understanding people.
But yeah, I mean, I suppose that's pretty much everything that we wanted to talk about right today. Is there anything else you want to kind of add into this?
I think that's it.
Perfect. If you do want to kind of get in touch, you can follow us on Instagram. You can find me at Hack the Body, Hack the Mind. You can find Mark at Mark Origin Series. Yeah, thank you so much for tuning in. This has been Real Coaching Radio. Thank you very much for tuning in today. If you want to get in touch or ask any questions, please send an email to info@realcoachingradio.co.uk. If you're interested in joining the coaching world and enhancing your education, please head to www.myptcourse.com. There are level 2, level 3 and level 4 courses that will help get you started in your fitness career. Thank you once again for tuning in. Thank you for your continued support. You can connect to us on Instagram, Real Coaching Radio. We have an Instagram, or you can find me at Hack the Body, Hack the Mind, or Mark at Mark Origin Series. You can also follow at Origin_Series_online. Mark kind of releases a lot of education content on there, or online kind of tips and tricks, I guess you could say. But yeah, thank you once again for tuning in. This has been Real Coaching Radio.